I mean, first session after lunch is a bit tricky, so try to keep it as exciting as possible. So what we're going to talk today is about developing Alfresco applications with Maven. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Maven. I suppose most of you, if you're here. So there are a few things that we will cover today. So we'll start with a little bit of history. There's been many efforts around providing a full Maven SDK for Alfresco over the years. So we're going to go a bit through clarifying what this effort has been and what it brought us to. We'll definitely go and have a look at the brand new features of the Maven Alfresco SDK 1.0 that was just launched about 10 days ago, prior to the Berlin DevCon. And obviously, what does that mean in terms of productivity? And I will do a quick demo for you to see how you can leverage this SDK to work against Alfresco in a pretty much standard way. So before starting, I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes on this slide. I'm sure you have seen that. It's a so-called golden circle. It was introduced by Simon Sinek in a TED Talk a couple of years ago, and I think it's a very good way to decompose and introduce the topic. So basically, first understand why you do something, then how you got there, and obviously, finally, what does this offer? So I'm going to try to, I don't pretend to be as cool as he is, but I'm going to just try to, follow this approach when, describing how we got to having a Maven Alfresco SDK. So we start with the why, which I think is fundamental, and I've been really passionate about this project over the last year. So for me, it's really important for you to understand how we got to, building a full Alfresco Maven compatible SDK. So I'm going to start with the story today. I'm used to work for an Alfresco partner before working for Alfresco itself. And I don't know if this is a story that you can probably share. About 6 years ago, I was asked to learn Alfresco. Basically, it was something like, Gab, you should learn Alfresco. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to sell you as an Alfresco expert. So that's what we did. We all love cool frameworks. We all love modern open source frameworks. So it was really an exciting challenge for me at the time. I was young and thin and lots of hair. But the cool thing is that really the framework itself, my evaluation was really like, yes, Alfresco is really cool. It's really a neat framework, nice architecture. But there were a few things that I was missing at the time. I come from the open source background. I'm committer for Apache. So there were certain things that I was still missing while developing and extending the Alfresco framework. Stuff like unit testing of my customization. That's been a bit of a trouble over the years to get it easily working in enterprise or community environments, or stuff like Alfresco module packages. What is this Alfresco module packages thing? I mean, at the beginning, I was I'm very fond of standards. So considering that an AMP is actually just a zip with Java code and resources inside, I was like, really, do we need a custom package for developing against Alfresco? And what is this extension root thing? I don't know if you have followed training, but this is a common way of developing in your Tomcat shared classes. And honestly, to me, this is a very manual and error-prone way of developing. Especially, it's very difficult to automate when you go in continuous integration or continuous delivery environment. So stuff like rapid development. How can I quickly download the platform, customize it, deploy it, package it, and ship it to your customer. Stuff like dependency management. In enterprise-controlled environments, it's more and more fundamental, especially when you work with open source, to really know what code is actually going in your application server, even what licenses this code brings in, because both from a technical and legal perspective, that's something that you really want to have under control. So all these kind of things, including integrating, as I said before, my development process into the deployment and delivery process were a little bit, missing at the beginning for what was my experience on Alfresco development. So, if you want to do a metaphor, it's pretty much like, for me, was at the time developing like a, big black box. So get the whole installer, get the whole software, and find your way, and without a, pretty much of a clear contract and a high level of automation that I was looking for. So, as I said, I was working for a partner, and ECM is a people business, really. So it's complex by nature. I don't think the technical issues with ECM are, rocket science, but having to work with, multiple people, multiple teams, different requirements. This is a typical project I used to work at the time as a big Alfresco customer. As you can see, there is, a huge Alfresco foundation project, many different business projects, business processes, each of them requiring customizations on Alfresco, different verticals integration, different teams working on it. So, when they told me, you gotta manage the whole thing, I was architect for this project. So, I was looking for a solution to manage development, manage large teams, and, integrate different projects. So when they told me that, the solution would have been to use Eclipse and Ant, my reaction was not really that positive, and I decided to drop out and become a hippie and just go around mystic travels to India. So when I actually recovered myself from the shock, I decided to start a community effort. The good thing about Alfresco is that open source, and I think that an SDK is the main point of contact with our community. So I think that starting this as a community effort was a good idea. It turns out that today we're here talking about the completion of this process, if you want. So yes, I have never used the Alfresco SDK. I've always tried to take the standard bits of Alfresco, like jars, words, and even amps, and manage them with my tool of choice, which is, in this case, Maven. Before we move on, though, I just want to make sure here that this is not a tool battle. As I said, I have a preference for a tool, but a fool with the tool is still a fool. So I get many times the comment on, I prefer Ant, I prefer Maven. I'm like, guys, really, I don't think they solve the same problems. Yes, there is an overlap in terms of building your software, but there are very different aspects of it. Maven tries to also integrate your process, integrate your development in the enterprise or community development processes, try to give a standard approach. So again, this is not a tool battle. I don't really want to go there. I think the main reason, and we go back to the why, is for me to have the freedom of working with the platform that I love, Alfresco, both in its community and enterprise version, in the very same way, without having the lock-in to a specific IDE. For example, there are people using IDE, people are using Eclipse. I don't really want my development process to be bound to an IDE, because then when I go to continuous integration, or I go in a headless server that needs to deliver my software, there's no way an IDE can be run there. So I want to be independent from the IDE, but I want to be able to integrate with my IDE of choice so that it can be easy for developers to work on it. And once again, I've been working as a partner for 3 years, and now 4 years as an Alfresco consultant. Well, I see way too much time spent on actually setting up the system, on actually configuring a cluster. I think that the main core business of people implementing Alfresco should actually to add value to the platform, to build solutions, rather than spending time in putting the files in the right place. So again, that's, I think, the main reason why we came to build a standard SDK based on Maven for Alfresco. So how we got there? Now we got the why. Let's see how we got there. There was an evil plan that I put in place, which was trying to open that black box that we were talking about before, so making it more granular and accessible for developers. And that means really having a clear taxonomy of the Alfresco delivered artifacts, not just words, zips, but also the jars and amps that we developed and released to the community, and making them available on the Alfresco Artifacts Repository. If you followed this topic, you know that in June we have launched a full support for enterprise and community Maven repository. It's available at artifactsalfresco.com, and that was obviously the first, fundamental milestone to build a full SDK on, the Maven, based on the Maven paradigm and automation. Once that we opened the black box, obviously the idea, and we will see later, was to, fill it with samples, making sure that people could, do as less errors as possible while evaluating Alfresco, while integrating Alfresco, while packaging their own customized solutions on Alfresco. So you'll see in the next slides, we produced what in Maven is called archetypes. So a couple of sample projects that should aggregate all the best practices around Alfresco development. I think that the other point here is that for how much we suggest that, nobody likes to RTFM. Yeah? Nobody really likes to spend half an hour on something that should be pretty easy. So the idea is making sure that the sample projects allow you to have a kickstart on Alfresco without having to bother with half to 1 hour reading of a manual. And obviously, as I said before, I think the main driver to actually having a large usage of this SDK, as I'm seeing, especially in the last couple of years, was to make this a community project. And this is actually still a community project. It's fully backed by Alfresco. We have enterprise artifacts available, but the SDK itself is developed on Google Code so that we can have community participation. We are open to actually respond to the use cases of real community members or enterprise customers working on the SDK. So, quick round of history just to clarify some confusion. I've seen that we kind of changed names and rebranded this a few times over the last 5 years. I've been starting work, I started working on it around late 2007. So just for you to know, I just give you this slide as a kind of a consolidation. As you can see, this year we had 2 important milestones, especially the artifacts repository, as I said before, fully supporting enterprise, and just like before Berlin's DevCon, the support and the release of the 1.0 SDK. So if you find stuff like Maven Alfresco Archetypes, Maven Alfresco Lifecycle, Maven Alfresco SDK, that's all the same. Yeah, that's all the same project, and you can, we kind of consolidated documentation there, and you should be able to now get a uniform and stable experience. Fundamental point that maybe doesn't come out is we now also have POM available for our Maven artifacts. This means that each single Alfresco jar defines all the dependencies that it has. We will see how this is key to actually build a full development process, including unit and integration testing, as well as obviously a more fine-grained access to the Alfresco deliverables. So as you can see, it took 4 years to actually get there, but with a little bit of patience, we actually got there, and now we can basically develop on Maven with Alfresco. So I think it's about time to actually get into the interesting bit. So we know the why, we know the how, we can move into actually what WTF this SDK does. Let me just give you a quick overview. As I said, the project has been restructured many times, but I think we are right now at a pretty stable version of the SDK. There are 4 main components that you want to become familiar with. I think the first 2 are pretty straightforward, and I will spend some time also on the last 2 to get you an idea of what they are about. So as many open source projects, as many open source frameworks, we introduced the Alfresco specific Maven plugin, which is now supporting embedding the Alfresco MMT. Therefore, it provides support for packaging amps as well as for installing those amps into your world. This means that the full life cycle of an amp can be fully managed within your Maven build without having to resort to external tools. And I think that's pretty important when you're working in a continuous integration environment that you want to have a fully reproducible application lifecycle. So the Maven plugin, we have a single SDK entry point, which is a parent POM, is the so-called Alfresco SDK parent POM. So if you are a bit more experienced with Maven, you know that one of the most powerful features is to actually support project inheritance. So this parent POM that you can refer from your project basically will allow you to inherit all the typical developer use cases or features that you want to have in the, while managing an Alfresco application. So it allows you to, for example, run Alfresco embedded. It allows you to automatically install all the amps on a Word project. It allows you to do, many other things like cleaning your data. I mean, I'm not going to go into details here, but it's really one single entry point. By referring this parent POM, you will get all the features of the SDK already available in your project. So, this means that you don't have to recreate your projects. You can just adapt your current development lifecycle to the SDK. I think one fundamental point is, and obviously, I have to give praise to the Alfresco release management team here that is backing this SDK. We introduced the so-called platform distribution POM, which is really just a simple aggregator of all the artifacts that are distributed per Alfresco release. The idea is that by referring to this POM, you will be able to actually have, first of all, a clear description of all the artifacts available, and that's really good when you want to use them in your specific projects. But since this POM is delivered at each community and enterprise release, basically this will be your single entry point to actually switch the platform that you're using. So if you want to move, for example, from community to enterprise, we will see later in the example, it's just a matter of changing the dependency on this POM. This means that you want to use 4.2.0, you just change one line, and automatically all the SDK, all your project is going to be building against a different Alfresco version. I think this is fundamental for, I'm thinking about use cases like upgrade or, even community to enterprise migration. Obviously, these are, concepts that for who's familiar with Maven are, pretty straightforward. But there are many people who just want to get up to speed as soon as possible on this technology. And that's for them that really we packaged sample projects in the form of archetypes. Maven provides this, very good feature to actually foster process reuse. So the ability for you to snapshot a working project, make it a sample, and have people create it and instantiate it. So we have two samples. We will see the demo around those. You can create just with one command a quick amp project that will allow you to package and deploy your amps as part of the standard Maven lifecycle. And we have a much more probably interesting and fully fledged all-in-one archetype. This is basically a multi-module Maven archetype that includes customization of the Alfresco repository, customization of share, a solar, web quick start, and pretty much it gives you either a quick way to start a project or even a demo if you are in a more pre-sales environment, as well as start a fully fledged enterprise Alfresco project. So the good thing is, with the very same command, you get both. So we'll see this in more details later. So if you're more of a visual person, that's probably something you're interested in. Just wanted to make sure that, the different levels of this SDK were pretty clear. As you know, obviously at the core, we have the support of the Alfresco Artifacts Repository. So we have if you go to artifacts.alfresco.com, you'll see that since the latest releases, we are making available all the jars, wars, and zips of Alfresco there. So you can definitely directly depend on them if you want to just use a jar. I mean, if you're familiar with Maven, it's just a few lines, and you can get any Alfresco dependency in there. But If you want to also manage the lifecycle of an AMP, you can directly reference the plugin. As I said, it's just a Maven plugin. It has standard goals that you can call. So if you're more familiar with Maven, you can just go at the plugin level and hook up and use it in your projects. If you want to manage a full-blown, full SDK power project, then you can reference the SDK POM. And obviously, if you are really just starting from scratch, obviously the quickest and if you want more productive way is definitely to instantiate the project from an archetype, have it ready, check it in your source control, and get it going. So before we move into the interesting bit of the demo, I just want to give a couple of compatibility notes. As I said, this SDK wouldn't be possible, although it's a community effort, it wouldn't be possible without proper support from the Alfresco release management team, making available the artifacts in a layout that the SDK expects. So thanks to solving that issue up there, that basically introduced the POMs for each and single Alfresco artifact, we are now in the position to actually run a fully fledged SDK. The limitation there is that this deployment procedure has been enabled only as of Alfresco 4.2b. So at the present time, today, the SDK works as of Alfresco Community 4.2b plus. We are making sure that the next enterprise release that comes out will also be compatible with this SDK, but at the present time, there is not yet an enterprise release out compatible with SDK. So your mileage might vary until we get out the next enterprise release that is compatible with this. As I said, we tested it internally. It works with enterprise, and I'll show you how quick it is to switch potentially a version. And here is a probably needed support notice. As I said, one of the great advantages of this SDK is that you can run everything embedded, so you don't need any, it's pretty much a zero downloads type of approach. You don't need external application server, you don't need the database. It runs embedded in Jetty plus H2. H2 is an in-memory database. Obviously, this is really purely for rapid development and, integrated runtime purposes. This is not a supported configuration for Alfresco Enterprise, if you want. So just to make it clear here, when you run Alfresco in Jetty embedded with H2, just make sure that this is really for your development processes, and make sure that then you always test it on the target supported stack. Obviously here I'm talking about Alfresco Enterprise customers. So let's maybe finally try to keep you a little bit awake with some demo. Let's see if the demo gods are with me. And can you actually see the screen? So before starting, I wanted to make sure that one of the prerequisites of the SDK is actually in place. This is not really needed if you just want to package an AMP, or if you want to just build the project. That's going to be easy. But if you want to run Alfresco embedded, or if you want to run the unit tests, which pretty much is running the whole Alfresco to being able to start all the Spring application contexts that are needed, then you will need a little bit of memory. Yeah, as you know, if you go with the default JVM parameters, we have some minimum prerequisites to run Alfresco. So this is documented in the SDK homepage, but I'm just showing it here to make sure that you guys know that if you want to run it on the command line, then you might set some Java JVM memory options to actually being able to run it. On the other hand, if you forgot, it is pretty easy to spot, because your JVM will complain with heap memory space or permanent generation side space. So again, if you're familiar with running Alfresco or Java applications, this should be quite straightforward. So I'll make sure that that is set up. And what I'll do is actually show the one command that is needed to create a project. Let's see if I copied it properly. So this is a standard Maven command to generate a project from an archetype. I didn't test the connection before. So. Now, we are referring the archetype catalog that is available on artifacts.alfresco.com. Now, there are a number of projects here, and I'm not sure the resolution really helps here, but what I'm going to show now is really the creation of a simple AMP project. So if you look at the highlighted lines, you'll see that there is an Alfresco AMP archetype there. So I will select number 8 in the list. As per any Maven project, I am being, I'm asked to specify what are the coordinates of my project. So what's my group ID, typically, your company name or your package name. So it will be in this case, my code. And my artifact ID, so in this case will be my custom AMP. Obviously, this will be the name of your project. As you can see, the SDK and the archetype is already pre-configured to use a specific Alfresco version. As I said, we tested the SDK with Alfresco 4.2b, so by default, we're actually using here Alfresco Community 4.2b. You can, obviously, at creation time, specify this if you're not happy, if you want to work against a different version, and the archetype will be created to work against your target version. So for now, I'll just proceed, create the archetype. If you see here, we have our nice folder created. Yeah, this is totally ID independent, but probably for a quicker and nicer experience, I'm just going to import this into Eclipse. I have the M2 Eclipse extension installed, so it's a Maven to Eclipse integration. It is pretty much, I think it's delivered with the Juno release of Eclipse, so with the latest release of Eclipse, you should get it already in there. Otherwise, it's pretty easy to install via update site. So I'm going to import the project. As you can see, Eclipse recognizes the Maven project. And we'll import it in. So a couple of things I want to show you here before moving on. First of all, we have the project ready, integrated with Eclipse. As you can see, Eclipse has already retrieved all the transitive dependencies that you need to actually run the tests in this case. I just want to show you, first of all, how the POM looks like. It is pretty simple, quick POM, because all the features actually come from the SDK parent. As I said, the single point of entrance to the SDK is a parent POM. So you can, this is just an example of how your project could also leverage the SDK. And then there are a few properties that I think are going to be very interesting for you developing on Alfresco. First of all, this is the single point of configuration of the Alfresco version that you're using. Yeah? So as you can see, I'm selecting org Alfresco. If I wanted Enterprise, that would be org Alfresco Enterprise, as simple as that. And obviously, if I want a different version, I can just change it here. So when I change those values and rebuild, Alfresco will retrieve the SDK will retrieve the appropriate Alfresco artifacts and build your customizations against a different version. So you see how upgrades and, for example, community migrations should be, fairly easy with that. Obviously, we have some other facilities like, configuring the log level or, the Alf data folder location, all sort of things that are fully automatically, replaced in your configuration file so that you can configure the full project development directly from the POM. Now, we're going to move into cool stuff, but I first want to show you that we defined a custom folder in the project. As you know, this is not a standard Maven layout folder. It's called source main amp. But we really made it for, lowering the learning curve for Alfresco developers. As you can see, this really maps to the standard, straightforward layout of an amp. So basically, if you have an amp developed with some other technologies, you can just drop it in source main amp, and pretty much it will work. One interesting bit that the archetype provides is that enforces best practices by generating the name of the module folder exactly with the specified artifact ID. So we have a single sourcing of the module name. You don't have to, you just select it in the POM. You don't have to change it in the module properties. The folder gets automatically created in the right way. Yeah? We'll see just a little later what this folder is about, but I'll just leave it here as a teaser, just to show that we have it in the standard Maven test folder. So, as I said, creating a project is pretty easy. We have shown one of the two archetypes. We will see the all-in-one just a little bit later. And again, I think this already starts enabling some of the general features that open source developers are used to already, let's say in 2012. So we'll see support for sources in Javadocs. As you've seen, I didn't download anything, but you'll see that we can automatically have sources and Javadocs imported in your IDE without any manual operation. As we said, we created the project. It's IDE independent, but it integrates with all IDEs. Eclipse has this integration. IDE has integration out of the box. So it's really more adaptive, although independent from IDE. Standard lifecycle, if you know Maven, you know that the commands that you run on Maven are pretty standard. We will see some of them just a little bit later. 0 downloads. Now, I'm not trying to fool anyone here. We all know that Maven downloads the internet, so obviously I did my homework and I just did it before, so you didn't have to see Maven downloading all sort of jars. But the point is, with one single command, you didn't have any external prerequisites if you want. No database, no application server needed. Yeah? So obviously, apart from removing the need for downloads, it also eases the configuration of your platform and the possibility of working on multiple projects at a time if you want. That's kind of really important when you, for example, in my case, are a consultant, or even in case of a partner in which you work on many different projects. By the means of archetypes, we have a way to prototype our projects, and you can, in complex ECM projects, that's very useful to actually have multiple modules developed in the very same way. And last but not least, we have the possibility of running unit and integration testing within the build. That is what we are going to demo just right now. So, first of all, as I said, this SDK provides, by the means of standard, if you want, Maven is a standard de facto. So by the means of running, a standard Maven clean package, what would you expect is that, this AMP project actually produces an AMP. The good thing is that we actually have also testing embedded in our SDK. So right now, what you're seeing is Alfresco actually starting up outside of an application server by simply, running the, loading the root Spring application context. And as you can see, it's really starting up the full Alfresco by, creating the schema. This was a fresh new install, so I didn't have any database or content created before. So by using the dependencies that are brought in by our SDK, this is actually, creating a whole ready environment to run tests in there. As you can see, the tests have been run and the build completed. So if we go in target, we see that the AMP is created. So we just ran a standard command, Maven clean package. I think it's the simplest command that anyone knows in Maven. And we actually had the expected effect, our test being run, as well as the AMP package in our target. I just want to show you a little bit nicer feature, I think. I'm running, Maven test is a subset of what we ran before, is an earlier life cycle, but I'm running it with this particular switch, which allows remote debugging of the current instance of Maven. So I'm just running now with this option. As you can see, the Maven blocked, waiting for me to connect with my remote debugger to the application to being able to actually debug what's going on. So what I'll do is actually go back to my Eclipse, create a debug configuration, remote Java application, As you might have noticed, the port was 5005 by default. So I can just attach my debugger, move to a debug perspective. You can see here it's attached, and Alfresco, let's say the test procedure is starting again. Now what I'll do is actually, if I made it in time, I'll go in my test, yeah, put a breakpoint. Now if we go back to our test runner, we should see in a little that thanks to the remote debugging capability, we actually have a breakpoint set. What I actually wanted to show you is also, put the breakpoint in the wrong place, but let me just show you here. I'll just let the debugger go on. And I think I'm getting crazy with the visuals. Yeah. Let me just redo this. Yeah. No, but that's the thing. He should do it by himself. Let me just move this breakpoint here. Put it where it should be. Just reconnect the debugger. Basically, the point is, it will download the source automatically. Obviously, I blew my demo effect, thanks to the demo gods, but hopefully the second time is going to be better. Yep. One question here. Yeah. You might wonder that these are not really, integration. You're not fully unit tests, are mostly integration tests. Okay, I think we need to move forward. I've got only 5 minutes, but I actually tried this 5 minutes ago, and you can basically browse within the sources and even have automatically the sources downloaded. Yeah. So I didn't really attach anything from the Alfresco sources. That was automatically downloaded with Maven. And as you can see, this gives you a very good way to troubleshoot your problems directly in the unit testing phase. As if you have developed with earlier versions of the SDKs, with the anti-SDK, you know that you should have manually attached each single source to each single jar. So this is totally a new feature which I think will enable a much faster pace of development there. So since it sounds like, well, we are running a bit late. Well, we actually started 10 minutes late. So, as we said, we've seen general features. There are some Alfresco-specific features that I think are also very interesting. We already discussed how to change and switch the platform. We showed how this can support AMP packaging. What we will see, if we have time, is how to install those AMPs into the WAR. If you are familiar with the Maven WAR plugin, you know that it supports the concept of overlay, and we will see that the AMPs can be easily installed by using the standard Maven WAR configuration into the Alfresco WAR. And obviously, we can manage pretty much all the components of the Alfresco ecosystem. So extending the repository, running share, and customize it, as well as even configuring Solar. Yeah. As we discussed before in the onion graph, if you want, there are a few entry points. It really depends on how you want to use the SDK. Definitely, there are the two archetypes. We just saw the AMP archetypes. We will see the all-in-one right now. But as I said, if you are a bit more experienced with Maven, you can just refer to the SDK parent and have all the developer features already enabled in your project. We have, I'm not going to go into the details of this slide, but there are a few ways you can also use the plugin. Obviously, you can leverage the archetypes, but you can also use the plugin to do a custom installation of an amp that you have available. And just to make it clear, this is fully compatible with the existing amps. So you can just take an existing amp, add it as a dependency, and have it installed directly in your Alfresco. Obviously, we have support for running embedded, but the other good things is that you are running in a standard lifecycle. So deployment, release, packaging, and all the features from Maven are obviously available here. Now, I'm not sure if we will have time to actually run it, since we are pretty much at the edge, but I just want to show you the other archetype, which is the all-in-one. We did the same command that we did before. We are referencing, we're generating an archetype from a catalog. Just one archetype later, so number 9, that's the all-in-one archetype, which allows you to manage pretty much all the components of the Alfresco platform. So once again, I'll generate my project. I think this is really good for demos, as well as for starting up a full-blown project. Just import it. It's been created, as you can see. I'll import it in Eclipse, fighting with screen resolution. Yeah, so just quickly import it. Maven recognizes a number of submodules, and we'll basically import them as separate projects. But if we look at the full-blown art projects, you can see that in there you have a number of modules. So you have an Alfresco overlay, which allows you to customize the Alfresco war. You have a share overlay, which allows you to do exactly the same, but with share. You have an amp. So it basically embeds also the amp features that we've seen before with the amp archetype. As well as, we put some other goodies in there. It allows you to configure Solar. It allows you to even overlay the WCM Quick Start. So just to show, pretty much the whole functionalities of Alfresco and being able to actually download them, run them, and customize them at the same time. I'm just going to show you that we have an additional project, which is the runner, which, as you can imagine, configures a Jetty embedded plugin to run the full platform. So the Alfresco war, the Solar war, the Share war, and the Web Quick Start war. The way we actually trigger this, it's very simple. As I said, I'm not sure if we're going to have time to see it running. It might take a little bit. But with a pretty much standard command, I'm not sure if you can see it, but with the run switch. So if you know Maven, you know that you have profiles. So this is a run profile that will enable automatically all the projects to be built and then to be run embedded. Once again, in Jetty plus H2. I think I'd rather go on while this one is building and running. As you know, it might take a couple of minutes. So while this guy is overlaying, I just want to show you one, I think, interesting bit. That is, we have seen how to package amps. This is the way how you actually depend on amps. This is a standard Maven War plugin configuration. We are in the Alfresco War project. We can just simply, reference our amps. For example, here I have the, embedded amp depended upon by the war, as well as a standard Alfresco amp. So this is really also a sample for you to see how you can leverage existing generally available amps within this SDK. Now, the build is going to take care of doing that while I go towards conclusion. Hopefully, as a last thing, I can show you the whole thing running. Just a couple of pointers. We revamped the whole website. This is now a Maven-generated documentation website. If you go to the URL, a bit complex one, but you'll have it in the slides. or if you go even on the wiki and you search for Maven Alfresco SDK, you get pointers to actually have a full description of the SDK capabilities. So I think this is really one of the neatest point of entrance where you can start practicing with the SDK. So let's move into conclusions and wrap up. If you have, let's say, there are a couple of ways I think we can look at the, what this brings in. Definitely, if you're a visual person, you want to have one big conclusion is that you don't need extension root anymore. So you don't want to develop, in a pretty much manual and error-prone way in the extension folder. But, a bit more in detail, I think that this enables a much more automated way and reproducible way of developing on Alfresco. You can test unit and in integration your code, and I think that's going to be good for you, but especially good for me as a consultant coming in to solve problems. And obviously, you can manage pretty much all the components. As I said, 4.2b is required to actually work on this. Few other things that are going on. There are more archetypes coming in from other teams, including the benchmark team. Down there, Michael is been working on it, as well as we have a Spring Surf archetype. So I think we are starting to leverage this technology more and more to enable reuse of process, not just of code. So, enabling standardized and repeatable development processes. And we're having, I'm seeing a very interesting growth on both the community side as well as on the enterprise subscribers on the Artifacts repository. So if you're interested into the details in staying up to date with the project, you can join Google groups. We have a community project there. Now, I'm just going to conclude here. As you know, this is Movember. Again, I don't think we did here something that we can claim it improved men's health. And anyway, I'm 31 and I didn't get mustache yet, so I might have to wait for the next edition of Movember. But I really do hope that at least this, is going to improve the experience and somehow the health of Alfresco developers. So it's with pretty much this hope that I wish you a happy Mayvember. And before really closing, let's see if Alfresco started up. It is actually starting up. My computer is suffering a little bit. You can see the whole build that basically overlaid the different words. Alfresco is starting up here. I would like to actually show it running in the next, hopefully 1 minute. But I can see my laptop quite struggling. As I said, this is running actually Alfresco, Share, WCMQS, Solar. Maybe while this is going, we can ask a couple of, if there are a couple of questions. Down there, please.
Yeah, why would you want to do an overlay project in addition to an AMP project?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. So in 5 or 6 years working on Alfresco, I've noticed, I think that there are two main approaches to the repository customization. As you say correctly, one is the AMP. And for me, the AMP, following the name Alfresco module package, it is really a package feature that you might want to be able to deploy on different Alfrescos. So for me, the AMP is really a well-contained software module that adds feature to your instances. For example, if you are into instead, configuring your database, configuring your subsystems, configuring where the, content store should be, or, lower level Alfresco configurations, I typically do that in an extension project, which is just like, a simple overlay, environment aware of, production staging, whatever environment you're building against. But that would be overlaying the war. And also, that's what I call foundation project. So you have the base project, and that will actually aggregate all the amps. So I think you still need, a base project that then aggregate everything, and it makes a, a war deliverable for your customers. It really depends on, how the delivery process is structured on your side. Started? Yes. I'll just show you that I was not fooling you. And we close. I'll take a second. Yeah, we have share. Thank you. Just to conclude, I also do this so that I show you that even Solar is actually working. We have results. Yeah? So, thank you very much.